So today, I want to take you through a really practical use case of how you can apply a framework that is free using tools you already have to accelerate your message development process. So I'm going to start with a story because we're all storytellers in here. And one of the things I've really tried to do in 2026 as I've thought through my product marketing motions is to take it out of theory and apply it to real world examples. And so this framework that I'll talk you through today didn't come from a theory, it came from a real launch where we had to figure out things under pressure. It was a big launch, high visibility, lots of pressure, and of course, lots of opinions. And I think what made it interesting was everybody in the room, everybody involved in the launch was smart. They had business acumen. They knew what we needed to do to drive the business forward. And yet, we had a messaging problem. We had done everything right. We had conducted workshops. We had frameworks, internal alignment, and still, we had 3 different messages. Of course, the CEO had his favorite. Sales had theirs, and product had a third. Then someone asked the big question, which one resonates with the customer? Quiet. Nobody had the answer. And when someone's asking that question about resonating with the customer, yes, we want to know what sounds good, but what we really want to know is what's going to drive revenue. Which one should we bet the launch on? And when somebody asked that question in that room as we were preparing our go, no-go, we didn't have an answer. And as a product marketer in that room, I felt my face flush because we were expected to have the answer, but we just didn't have the inputs to confidently provide it. So the room got quiet because we didn't have the time, we didn't have the budget, and you know that launch date is not moving from the calendar. So we did something scrappy, something that like a startup would do. We ran a simple test, 2 landing pages with 2 different messages, and we ran traffic to both of those for 2 weeks. One message generated almost 3 times as many demos as the other. Was this hard science? No. But it gave us something more valuable and something that we could take action on, directional signal. So here's the interactive part of our presentation. Quick show of hands. Who has been asked to validate messaging without a research budget and with a launch date already on the calendar? Okay, keep your hands up. Has this happened more than once? This is not an edge case. It's how most product marketing operates. So this is what the gap looks like for product marketers. This is where we live. We're expected to validate messaging, reduce go-to-market risk, and bring customer insight. But we often don't have budget, research, or time. So what happens, when that happens, what do we end up with? Opinion battles. And I like to use this expression that I learned like 15 years ago. When you're in a opinion battle, often the hippo wins. And the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. And so if we can remove that from the equation, we will have better luck. And I want you to know that this shift or this message testing gap where we live today, it hasn't gone away. If anything, the expectations have gone up. We're expected to know the market, know the customer, know the message, validate it, and move fast. And we all know those things don't naturally coexist. So this is the shift. You don't need perfect research. You're going to hear me say this a lot. Today it'll be your takeaway. You need directional signal. And directional signal is underrated because it's not perfect, but it's actionable. Perfect research is often too slow to make decisions. Directional signal is what actually moves things forward. And now we have something new. Well, sort of new. It's a few years old. AI. AI doesn't replace traditional message testing motions, but it has provided us a laboratory where we can play and experiment. And AI changes the speed of message testing, but it doesn't change our responsibility. So here's where AI actually helps. And I know we talked a lot about AI today. We've talked about digital twins, we've talked about agentic AI, we've talked about chaining teamworks. This is really a practical, basic framework that you can use without any sort of AI sophistication. Just to level set, AI is good at a few things, three specifically. Pattern recognition. It can review your customer calls or your customer chats so much faster than it would take you to skim 5 chats. It can simulate reactions. It can act like a skeptical buyer or a skeptical customer instantly. And one of the best things that I like to use AI for is to clean up my room, which I like to think of it as summarizing all that messy qualitative data and turning it into something structured. So that makes it useful for things like testing your hook, testing your headline, measuring your claims, understanding persona reactions, and understanding buyer objections or conflicts. But this is what's important here. It does not replace real customer validation, but it helps you develop hypotheses. And with those hypotheses, it will help you see things faster. So when I'm setting up my framework for message testing, there are 3 variables I like to focus on. Because when we think about message testing, there are often a lot of things that we can message test. We can drown in testing variables. But what we have to really do is focus and be disciplined about the things that we test. So I would encourage you to focus on one of 3 things in your message tests. Begin with your hook. Are you framing the problem in a way that grabs a user's attention? This is the first impression. This is your chance to make a difference. Is it enough to stop a buyer and get them to pay attention in a crowded, messy, noisy world? Claims. Claims are important, as we all know. They are our credibility, and they need to be believable. So if I have a claim that says something like, let's improve productivity, or a claim that says, give each of your rep 5 hours back so they can sell more each week, which one is more believable? Which one is more abstract? Which one is more tangible? The third piece to test is positioning, and this is also the differentiation. We often have claims or positioning that sounds like we are better, when really what we need to explain is how we solve things differently. And all of this is what creates movement. If you get these 3 elements right, everything gets easier. But if you don't, no amount of polish or lipstick will fix it. So I'd like to take you through 3 different AI tests that you can use to develop your hypotheses. The first one, and when I'm talking about these AI tests, I'm thinking through about the range of tools available to us today. Any Gen AI tool, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, really whatever, Copilot, whatever's at your fingertips, you can use those tools to do these tests. So the first test is the persona reaction test. Hopefully, as product marketers, we have defined our ideal customer profile, we understand who we're targeting, and we understand the business outcomes they are trying to achieve. So as we are looking through our messaging and our positioning, we can react like our buyer. And if you remember me from last year, I told you my favorite AI prompt was act as if. It's changed. This year, my favorite prompt is react as if. So I really want you to put yourself in the position of your key persona and ask, through your prompt in your Gen AI tool, ask a question like, react to this message as a CIO at a mid-sized enterprise company. What would make you skeptical? What questions would you ask? This helps you spot weak hooks, identify confusing language, surface objections early, and all before you spend $1 on ad spend. And what's really powerful here with this test is speed. You can run versions of this test in minutes. And what I'm looking for is friction. Where does the buyer hesitate? Where do they question? Where do they lose trust? And this is where your messaging breaks. The second test here is around claim clarity testing. So as we mentioned, AI is great at developing patterns or seeing patterns and things like that. It's also very, very good at exposing vague language. And this is one of the biggest issues I see. Messaging that sounds good internally, and it sounds good internally because it's been watered down internally. You've taken it through stakeholder review after stakeholder review, and approval cycle, and legal review, and brand review, and by the time you get your message ready to go, it is so watered down that you don't even know that it really makes any sense. So we want to make sure that we are delivering messaging that lands externally. I have a really simple example here of claim A and claim B. It's Captain Obvious, I know, but increase one claim, increase security visibility, or the other claim, detect threats 5 times faster. One sounds nice, one sounds real. And AI can help you see where you're being vague, where you're being not credible, and where you're losing buyers. And what's important to remember here is that when vague messaging feels safe, when it feels like you've gotten through the guardrails of the internal politics, it's actually created a lot of risk. And it's important to remember that buyers don't push back. They just move on. The third AI test is objection discovery. So again, I said react as a persona is one of my favorites, but here's where you can nuance that quite a bit and say, what objections would my CFO have or my target persona have? And AI will surface, do you have pricing concerns, ROI concerns, integration concerns, operational friction because of the complexity of the deal? And most deals don't die because of features. They die because of unaddressed concerns. So what AI helps you do in this test is to surface those concerns early, before they show up in pipeline reviews and on customer calls. And this is incredibly valuable for sales alignment. Okay, so we talked through 3 things that you can do with AI. Super great, it's making you faster, you're optimizing, you're on a roll, but it's very important to know that this does not live in the AI lab. You have to take it to the market. The market will give you truth, and you need both. So if you skip the second step of the market phase, you're just optimizing the hippo faster. So here's what I would like to call the no budget testing toolkit. And this is a very practical, real-world use case that you can use to apply to any of your messaging and positioning. Think about the channels that exist today within your marketing organization that you can use to test what you've just discovered through your AI work. Look at your landing pages, fastest signal for hooks and headlines, ads and emails. Again, a very quick signal for attention. Sales calls. Sales calls are my favorite. Sales calls are so underrated, and because sometimes we think sales doesn't like us marketers, but we need those sellers. Sellers and those sales calls are live message testing environments. And if you remember what I said before, you're not looking for perfect data. You're looking for directional signal. So you can look for that directional signal in the behavior of your buyer on clicks, replies, questions asked, demo requests. And I'm just going to go on a tangent here because I've had a lot of fun with it. When I say that sales conversations are underrated, I sincerely mean that. When we have all been on the phone, when they say this call may be monitored for quality or testing, right? We have all been there. Those calls are recorded, and you know what they've given us? A treasure trove of transcripts that we can then use AI to mine. So when we're looking for the words that our customers are actually using, so we want to make sure that we're talking to them in the words and the voice that they are using. That's in those chats, that's in those transcripts. We can mine those and find those. So I highly encourage, if you're not already engaged in reviewing and analyzing those calls, sitting in on those calls, being part of those discovery conversations, make it maybe one of your personal growth areas this year. Okay, so we talked about AI, we talked about getting into the market, but here's what us as product marketers need to avoid. Please don't confuse analysis with insight. This happens all the time. As an example, we hear from AI, review these call transcripts, tell us themes and trends that you're seeing that we should address. AI comes back and says, price comes up a lot. Everyone panics. Everyone's like, we've got to adjust price. We need a discount. We need a spiff for sellers. Like all these things happen because it's like price. But it's actually not price. What it is, if you look as we as humans do the interpretation, as we look for the insights, if you listen to the calls, customers are not saying this is too expensive. They are saying, I don't understand what I'm paying for. I don't understand the value. And that's a completely different problem to solve. So here's the repeatable framework. Identify the variable that you want to test. It's impossible to quickly test everything. Stress the test using AI. Find the weaknesses fast. Take what you've learned through AI and test it in the market. Expose it to reality. Put the water through the pipes. See where the leaks are. Observe. Look at the behaviors. Where are the clicks happening? Where are people abandoning? Are we getting the demo requests that we want? Refine based on those observations. Continue to tighten. But only scale when you have consistent behavioral responses in the market reality. And what I've outlined does not take months. You can do this in weeks. Remember, AI gave you the hypothesis. You tested it in the market to give you the truth. This is what speed looks like in product marketing. So, what I hope you've learned today. Don't look for perfect research. You need fast experiments to give you that directional signal. You need a meaningful variable to test, a channel with real buyers, and a directional signal to act on. And this is how we learn fastest, and this is how we improve our business. So, I'd like to close where we started. We didn't have, for that launch, we didn't have the perfect research. We certainly didn't have the budget. We had no formal studies, but we had the question. If you remember, we ran a very simple experiment. And the signal was clear. It gave us that directional insight that we needed to move forward. And what changed for me as a product marketer and as a product marketing leader is I stopped looking for certainty. I knew I just needed signal. So this is what I'd like you to do. Shift a bit. Don't look for perfect research. Bring your curiosity and your willingness to experiment and own the interpretation, the context, and the decision-making. The framework is simple. Identify the meaningful variable, run small experiments, look for directional signal. And your messaging won't just sound good, it will work in the market.